Blinken says a Taiwan crisis would be a global crisis. Beijing planning a new training facility in Cuba. Russian army hit by cholera outbreak after Kakhovka Dam flooding. South Korean leader calls for scrapping voting rights of Chinese nationals. Norway plans to mandate 40% quota for women on company boards. Taipei is the 10th most expensive city in the world. China cuts lending benchmarks to revive slowing demand. Kyiv in talks about setting up weapons production in Ukraine.
Hello, I'm Johnny. Thank you for joining us on Funday News. It's Wednesday, June 21st, and here are your top stories. China's Xi Jinping is hailing progress in regard to talks with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Beijing on Monday. At a press conference, Blinken told reporters that any crisis involving Taiwan in particular would affect every country in the world. Blinken said if as a result of the crisis that was taken offline, it would have dramatic consequences for virtually every country around the world, which is again why there has been rising concern about some of the provocative actions that China has taken. I also made that very clear.
Blinken said, "We and many others have deep concerns about some of the provocative actions that China's taken in recent years going back to 2016. And the reason that this is a concern for so many countries, not just the United States, is that will there be a crisis over Taiwan? The impact would most likely result in an economic crisis that could affect quite literally the entire world. 50% of the commercial container traffic goes to the Taiwan Strait every day and 70% of semiconductors are manufactured in Taiwan."
According to a report by the Wall Street Journal, China and Cuba are in advanced negotiations to establish a joint military training facility on the island, which is just 100 miles off Florida's coast. The proposed facility on Cuba's northern coast would be the result of a deal between China and Cuba, which is yet to be finalized. The Biden administration has reportedly reached out to Cuban officials in an attempt to prevent the deal from going through, citing concerns about Cuban sovereignty.
The plan for a military training facility in Cuba is part of China's Project 141, an initiative by the People's Liberation Army to expand its global military base and logistical support network. China and Cuba already jointly operate 4 eavesdropping stations on the island, which underwent a significant upgrade around 2019. The new facility could provide China with a platform to potentially house troops permanently on the island and broaden its intelligence gathering, including electronic eavesdropping, against the U.S.
Days after the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam in southern Ukraine caused catastrophic flooding, a military partisan movement has said the Russian army has been hit by a cholera outbreak. Atash, a military movement of Ukrainians and Crimean Tatars, cited informants from military hospitals of the Kherson region and Crimea as saying that many Russian soldiers are being admitted daily with suspected cases of cholera, a potentially deadly bacterial disease. Several Russian troops have died.
The Soviet-era dam was breached in the early hours of June 6. On June 13, Oleh Pavlenko, the head of Ukraine's State Environmental Inspectorate, said cholera and E. coli were found in water supplies in southern Ukraine. Atash wrote on its Telegram page, "The occupiers are suffering from a cholera epidemic. Entire units from the Kherson direction located along the North Crimean Canal have lost their combat capability and are taken to the rear for treatment. Several Russian soldiers died."
The leader of the ruling People Power Party on Tuesday suggested scrapping the voting rights of Chinese nationals living in South Korea, citing that Korean nationals in China don't enjoy reciprocal voting rights. Rep. Kim Ki-young made the remark in an address at the National Assembly, saying relations between South Korea and China should be based on the principle of reciprocity. Kim said about 100,000 Chinese nationals residing here had the right to vote. However, no suffrage is guaranteed at all for our people in China.
Kim said, "Why should we be the only one opening the latch? What is fair would be not to give voting rights to foreigners from countries that do not give our people voting rights." Since 2005, South Korea has given foreigners the right to vote in local elections after being a permanent resident for 3 years. Some critics have said the law gives China too much say in local politics. According to the South Korean Justice Ministry statistics, about 850,000 Chinese lived in South Korea as of last year.
I always needed time on my own. I never thought I'd be here.
I take your blessings with your heartaches too. It's so easy and so wonderful to know it's you.
学习，一切从今天开始。Funday 英语。
Norway's government reached an agreement with the business lobby and unions to force large and medium-sized companies to phase in 40% female representation on their boards within 5 years. The government said on Monday the plan will initially cover about 8,000 companies next year and expand to encompass about 20,000 companies with more than 30 employees by 2028. Firms with more than 100 million kroner in total operating and financial income will be covered initially.
The Norway's government said the threshold will drop to include those with income in excess of 50 million kroner. Norway ranked third in last year's Global Gender Gap report by the World Economic Forum, trailing only Iceland and Finland. The Norway government's calculations showed there will be a need to recruit almost 13,000 new board members by 2028. The requirements will also apply to cooperatives or housing associations with more than 500 members and business foundations.
In the newest ranking of Swiss wealth manager Julius Baer Group, Taipei, the capital of the war-threatened Taiwan, which ranked third in 2022, slipped to 10th place in 2023. Singapore surged to top the rankings as the most expensive city in the world for luxury living for the first time. The city-state, ranked 5th in 2022, leapfrogged ahead of Shanghai and Hong Kong, which are in second and third spots respectively. Another big gainer was New York, which rose to 5th from 11th last year, due to a strengthening dollar and a rebound from the pandemic.
Julius Baer's Lifestyle Index ranks the world's 25 most expensive cities by analyzing residential property, cars, business class flights, business school, degustation dinners, and other luxuries. Asia remained the most costly region for luxury living for the fourth straight year. In the 2023 ranking, Singapore, Shanghai, and Hong Kong are placed in the top 3, followed by London, New York, and Monaco, respectively. Currently, the internationally known city of Dubai is only one place ahead of Taipei.
The People's Bank of China cut its key lending benchmarks 1- and 5-year loan prime rate on Tuesday, the first such reductions in 10 months as authorities seek to shore up a slowing economic recovery. Although concerns about the property market meant the easing was not as large as expected, Reuters said the 1-year loan prime rate was lowered by 10 basis points to 3.55%, while the 5-year LPR was cut by the same margin to 4.20%.
The LPR, which banks normally charge their best clients, is set by 18 designated commercial banks that submit proposed rates to the central bank every month. Most new and outstanding loans in China are based on the 1-year LPR, while the 5-year rate influences the pricing of mortgages. China last cut both LPRs in August 2022 to boost the economy. While all 32 participants in a Reuters poll had expected reductions to both rates, the cut to the 5-year rate was smaller than many expected.
Ukraine's Deputy Minister for Strategic Industries, Sergei Boyev, said Kyiv was in talks with manufacturers from Germany, Italy, France, and Eastern Europe about producing weapons in Ukraine itself, including drones, and could sign contracts in coming months. Boyev told Reuters on the sidelines of the Paris Air Show, "We are in very detailed discussions with them, and we are certain that we will have the contracts agreement signed within the next few months."
Turkish defense company Baker said late last year that it still planned to complete the construction of a manufacturing plant in Ukraine in 2 years. Boyev said production in Ukraine could be an effective way to capitalize on the country's existing drone expertise and create jobs in western and central Ukraine. In May, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said the country was working with British defense company BAE Systems to set up a Ukrainian base to both produce and repair weapons from tanks to artillery.
Now let's take a look at the vocabulary of the news of Taipei being the 10th most expensive city in the world. Number 1. Ranking. 地位排名排位优质体育运动中 She has retained her number 1 world ranking. Number 2. Slip. 下降退步变差 That's 3 times she's beaten me. I must be slipping. Number 3. Surge. 物价利润等急剧上升飞涨激增 In fact, since 2015, the levels of CO2 in the atmosphere have surged. And that's all for today's Funday News. Be sure to tune in to Funday News from Monday to Friday and click the link below to join Funday for free. I'm Johnny Wu, your host. I'll see you next time.